I would like to introduce my staff and have each one of them come up so you can see our collective. This is a collaborative, and when I chose to come to the University of Virginia, as you can see, I didn't come by myself. There's a convoy of families that have followed, and for you to put names and faces together and see our interaction, I think that's important even before I talk about the recruiting process, even though they're completely intertwined. One is not inseparable from the other because these are the coaches that have done the work. So starting Robert and I, if Robert, come on up, will you? So Robert's our offensive coordinator. He and I have been together quite some time, and I consider all of my coaches my friends. And so I don't have a lot of friends outside of football. And I don't have a lot of friends outside of my coaching staff because we spend so much time together. So these men are not only exceptional at what they do, but they're my friends. Coach Ruff and McNeil. Coach Ruff is our assistant head coach, an inside linebackers coach. Coach Ruff is, if you've seen any of the Twitter today, he's an amazing guy. But Coach Ruff is my assistant head coach and former head coach at East Carolina. I love him. Our players love him. I'm not sure anyone who's ever met him doesn't. And it's just phenomenal and a great asset to our staff. Coach Kelly Papinga is our outside backers coach. Coach Kelly, he played for me, was a captain at BYU, and super bright young outside linebacker coach. I think every player but one that he's coached has gone on to the NFL. And in 3-4 defense, you got to have a great coach at that spot. And he's come up playing under and through our system and is exceptional. So Coach Papinga, Nick Howell, is our secondary coach and defensive coordinator, and the way that works simply is anytime I leave the room, so if here's the defensive room and I step out, defensive coordinator. I step back in, defensive coordinator. I step out, defensive coordinator, step back in, defensive coordinator. It works like that, and he's completely capable in any capacity in that role, and he puts up with me as the head coach doing it. But Nick is fantastic, was a graduate assistant for me, as was Kelly, and then has been together with me 9 years, and they finish my sentences a lot. Great families also. Coach Garrett Touge is our offensive line coach. Coach Touge played at BYU, was the former head coach at College of the Canyons, and does just an awesome job with our O-line, and brings a level of energy. When he and Coach Ruff get together, holy cow, is that fun. And if you add Coach Atawaya to the mix, Coach Atawaya, come on up, then there's entertainment for days. So Coach Atawaya is our running back coach / media specialist / producer of Twitter campaigns, as well as crime fighting, hit and run. If you haven't, do you even know that story? They don't know that story.
They don't need to know.
Yes, they do. So, were you in Florida?
Florida.
So in Florida, witnesses a hit and run and ends up chasing down the person that ran and got him. So besides all-around snow shoveling, crime fighter, Twitter producer, he's awesome, and as our running backs coach. And so, great story for you to follow up on. Real story and pretty cool.
Recent?
Yeah, a couple days ago.
Last week.
Last week. So we all been busy, besides coaching football. Next, Jason Beck. Jason's our quarterback coach. Played for me at BYU. Has been off and is a veteran of the coaching world, even though he's young. His wife just had twins. So tons of stuff happening. We have young families coming across. From my understanding, only Michigan has more children on their staff than anyone. So the family is literal to us. When you add our support staff members, we have the most in all of college football. So again, when I say a convoy is coming all the way across the country, this is real. And so Coach Beck is fantastic. Developed not only Taysom Hill. Taysom gets hurt in our first game against Nebraska, and Tanner Mangum, a true freshman, 3 months off his mission, then ends up having a fantastic season, so Jace helped with that. Let's see, Vic Soto. Vic played for me, was my first commit at BYU 11 years ago as the head coach, and Vic's wife was my personal assistant at BYU. I don't let many people do that, but Vic and I are. And then Vic went on and played 4 years or so in the NFL and is a graduate assistant for us, which will also be basically a full-time coach. He splits our defensive line with Shane Hunter. Shane, come on up. So Shane is our D-line coach and will handle the oversight of the D-line, but those two will break up and there'll be double duty on our defensive line. Shane Hunter, no surprise, played for me and was a graduate assistant for me. So these guys this isn't a system that's having to be now developed and started from scratch. This is now hitting the ground running full speed. And Shane has been with our front seven the past couple of years and is really, really skilled. And so besides Coach Howell and Coach Papinga and now Coach Hunter, 3 of my 4 defensive assistants all came up as graduate assistants in this system. And Coach Ruff helps me give oversight to the younger guys. All right, now Marcus Hagens. Couldn't wait to hire Marcus after I met him. So when I came to be announced to everyone as the new head coach at Virginia, I had a chance to interview Coach Hagens, and it wasn't a long interview, but man, I sensed the genuine authenticity, a passion to learn, and I saw a rising star in the profession, and he fits he fits perfectly with our staff, and I can't wait. I mean, it's been a seamless integration, and basically adding a family member and his wife Lauren and the 2 boys. It's just so much fun. Kids are the same ages. I mean, and we're having a blast so far, and Marcus is already adding a huge amount of value to our program. Next, so the next generation, let me go to the personnel director, Justin Anderson. So Justin is so our personnel director is Justin Anderson, came with me, again, from BYU, so not only full-time coaches, but support staff came also. And so our player personnel director is Justin Anderson. I think we have an exceptional system that works really fast, really efficient, and gets the right type of players for any place we're going to be. Luckily, that's a similar type of player here than it was at BYU, so we've already started kind of, again, full speed with that. Justin, a lot of his boxes weren't unpacked. He was at BYU, came from Louisiana, got to BYU, was there 1 year. Literally, a lot of boxes hadn't been unpacked, and they just went back on the truck, and now coming all the way back across the country. 6 children, and a couple moving trucks probably coming back this way. When?
A couple weeks.
Couple weeks. All right, good. Daquan, so graduate assistants and the next generation down, former player, and it's really fun because I had a chance not to keep anyone associated with the program. Daquan is a sponge in terms of, you can't, I'm surprised he doesn't have a notepad right now. I mean, anything we say, he's writing down and grasping, and there it is. It's just really fun to be with people that really want to learn. And he's appreciative of what we're doing already as a program and as a former player here. All right, Kyle Visiglia is our special teams coach. So Coach Papinga is our special teams coordinator. All of the work behind the scenes, every I dotted, every T crossed, every scouting report made, a lot of the drill work, almost everything else, Kyle Visiglia does as a graduate assistant, but really being treated as a full-time coach. And so we, as Division I football coaches, we've wanted the 10th coach, assistant coach for a long time. In fact, it's unanimous. There wasn't a single coach that voted against it. Why we don't have it, I'm not quite sure yet. So many of us have just added that in whatever capacity we have, and so Kyle is basically that role for us. And we'll be engaged and newly married next June. Not this June.
No.
That'll be a long engagement.
Yeah.
Okay, next, Sean Cascarano, again, former player here at UVA and a graduate assistant on the offensive side. So he's Daquan's running mate, and so the 2 younger generation guys that are still part of the program, one on each side, are, again, they're adding huge value, and they're also being worked to death already, not to death, but they're working really hard and to keep up. Okay, is there anyone else? So Blanda. So Blanda, come on up. So Blanda Wolf is kind of Justin Anderson's right-hand man in personnel and was held over from the previous staff. I wouldn't say held over, chose to keep. That sounds better. Blanda, and he's already added huge value to our program. So I think the best way to describe our approach, I ought to give Justin Anderson credit, our player personnel director. He's the one that coordinated the snow shoveling. What's really fun for a head coach is I knew nothing about it. And I knew nothing about the Twitter campaign getting ready to start in terms of what the content would be. Coach Atawaya does that. So on what we call our choice scale, can I have that chair? What we call our choice scale, the very highest level is creative excitement. That means people can't wait to do stuff to help the program or help other people. And so when everyone else sees our staff out there shoveling snow, I'm seeing it for the first time. By the way, Holly had my kids shoveling snow to get people out of the parking lot at the Residence Inn where we're staying at the same time, which was so cool. So none of that was coordinated, but it shows a commonality of purpose, which is really fun. And then I hear things about Coach Atawaya, stopping a hit and run. And I think what we all want to do is not only run a great football program, but be woven into the fiber and fabric of the community and really make a difference in that regard also. And So I think these men came not only because they believe in what we're doing and that it'll be successful, I think they came to make a difference in the community at large, and we're lucky to be in Charlottesville. So as a staff, y'all don't need to stay. I know the press conferences aren't the most exciting thing, but I wanted y'all to see who's going to make all this work. So, Jim, can I shift to recruiting now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll go ahead.
Let's let these guys get out of the room here. One thing you should know is Coach does not have a one-voice policy, so the staff is available to speak to the media, and we'll be happy to set those up for you in the future. And if you want more information about Coach Aitawaya's exploits, I'll see if I can get him back over here later on.
That's for now. There might be another one by tomorrow.
He might deliver a baby between the time he gets over to the
If you haven't been on
accused.
Twitter, and I'm not really a social media, so I love expressing our message through that because so many times it's defined for you if you don't have a voice. So I love having a voice, but I don't follow it much. I share the messages, but Coach Aitawaya, if you haven't seen the tweet of his daughter rapping or his family about our program, pretty fun to watch, and I didn't know anything about that either till I saw it, but pretty fun. Regarding this particular recruiting class, so it's a great starting place is the way that I would describe it. The majority of the recruits, overwhelming majority, Coach London and his staff identified and committed. And I was impressed as I went from home to home, and I didn't make it to every single home. I made it to the majority before our official visit weekend, but I was impressed by what Coach London had done with the quality of people. So as I went into their homes, the young men were polite, respectful, bright, and the families were strong. And I was impressed. And I had seen the film prior, and so I knew what you can ascertain from film, that they were, what quality of player they were, but I was more impressed by the type of people that they were. Some players along the way did choose to decommit based on relationships with assistant coaches or others that were recruiting them. Some changed when they saw what styles that we might be playing, and they knew or were either educated that it might not be a great fit. But I'm really comfortable where we ended up. We did add a few players from our staff in addition to what was committed. And I think that you'll find that as you research and get to know this class better. And there still might be others to come, even after this press conference. Possibly one, I would say, at least that might be announced as of today. I can't say for certain. But again, I would describe this class as a great starting point with good people and capability to fit into the needs of the program under the circumstances. We've already started working really hard on 2017. We're already behind in 2017, just simply because of our time frame here. So we're working diligently, and we're spending extra time as part of our workforce planning every single day. We're allotting almost double the amount of time we traditionally take to make sure our recruiting gets caught up for 17, which it will. By the time we hit summer, we will be caught up for 17, and we'll be right on track for 18. So that's kind of the transition we're going through right now. I have great coaches in terms of their work ethic and recruiting. They have excellent personalities. They're tireless. They're tireless. They love to be on the road, and they collaborate really well, and they like each other. And I don't like working with people that don't like each other. And these are my friends. They're also friends with each other, and I love that environment. The staff is actually thrilled to come to work every day. They believe in what we're doing, how we're doing it, and they like who they're doing it with. And that's the next part of this, is continuing to bring players that facilitate that. As we continue to drive the culture and develop work capacity, then we keep adding the right talent into that, and that's going to produce, I think, an amazing football team and football program. And so with that and those introductory remarks, I'll take whatever questions if anyone has any.
A reminder to introduce yourself and your media outlet, please.
Jeff White, VirginiaSports.com. When you looked at the returning players in the program, did you kind of determine any specific personnel needs? And if so, how well does this class address those needs?
That's great. I should have addressed that. So one of the first things that happened when I became the head coach is I had, and UVA did a really nice job, I had film clips of every existing committed player. They had also put together film clips by name of every player that played last year on the field in terms of competition or in practice. So I had a chance to evaluate all of them and then establish and we have a great software system that I helped develop that helps manage all that. And so I had a really clear picture. I'm a visual thinker and big picture oriented, so I had a really good idea of what we're going to need. And that's where some of the players decommitting started to happen because they just weren't going to be needed by existing players in depth, and some other needs that have changed. Right now, the biggest need that will have to be addressed in moving forward in the next two classes is both interiors, offensive line and defensive line. And so if you were to say the immediate and urgent needs for our program in moving forward to 2017, based on what had happened before and what's happening now, that would be the biggest discrepancy of what I would desire and what currently exists, especially in terms of numbers. I'm not necessarily saying quality, but the volume of players. And so that is something we work to address as best as possible. Not quite enough time to address it the way we'd want. And so again, I would say we're at a great starting place with not all needs met, especially in our interiors.
Coach Hank Kurz with the Associated
Yeah.
Press. How did you feel, or how important were Marcus and Daquan in kind of bringing some continuity, and how did you feel kind of the reception was when you went and saw all these new players who were coming here already, and you kind of needed to convince to come here?
Yeah. Pretty interesting. So addressing Marcus in particular, Marcus Hagens, I really had the intention when I came to be announced as the head coach wasn't with the sincere desire to add coaches from the UVA staff. There were a couple that I was considering, but everyone on my existing staff wanted to come. Once I met Marcus, my opinion changed, and it was I have to have him. And it wasn't necessarily the UVA ties, and it wasn't necessarily that he had played here or played in the NFL. It was really who he was and how he would fit. Having said that, I spent a lot of time out on the recruiting trail with him specifically because he was the connection to the committed class, meaning he had seen or knew most of those kids. So as I was going into homes, I was with him frequently. And all that really did is lessened the anxiety for the existing family of a committed player. There was a connection there. They felt much better once they had met me and when I left the home, because now a name was with the face and they heard the philosophy and it was like, oh, it's good, we're going to like this. They didn't know that. I'm talking about the committed players didn't know that until I was able to get in their homes. And others didn't know that until they came on their official visit. Marcus was really helpful in reassuring and allowing players to stay committed, and he was helping share the vision of what we were doing and how it felt along the way. And that's why the majority of the players chose to stay, I think, was Marcus's kind of linking the past culture with the future direction, and he was really helpful in doing that.
Hey, Coach.
Hey.
Brad Franklin with Cavs Corner, the Rivals
Brad.
Network. Was just curious, if we can talk a little bit about maybe some specific guys in this class. Who were some of the guys that really kind of caught your attention when you first watched those first film clips? Some guys who really jumped off the screen at you?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say because each time I announce or say one, there'll be other ones that I will have forgotten or possibly are offended. And because I like the entire class, and each has its unique and personal story that's specific to them. But it was so much fun just to see the diversity. So one night in particular, I had a chance to be in New Jersey, in Newark, and visiting Hassis, and the very next day I'm at Joe Reed's place, which is kind of out in the country in Virginia, and the contrast between the two types of homes and what the geographical surroundings look like was as distinct as it could be, but the similarity, what it felt like inside the house and home, was identical. And so I would say rather than talking about any player in particular, it was just fun to see the diversity of homes and geographic location, but the similarity of what a UVA football player and who they are really looks like. And I was impressed by that.
Yeah, Andrew Packard, Daily Progress here in Charlottesville. You mentioned going to New Jersey and the different things. Have you ever been to some of these places before when you were at BYU, and particularly in this part of the country, going northeast and stuff like that?
The only time I've been there is as an independent at BYU. We traveled a lot, the third most traveled team in the country. And so we'd come to play a game, but that's different as you just go to a hotel on the game site and go back. And speaking for Nike, I've been all over the country, but that's usually a fly in, speak, and fly out. This gave me a lot more chance to eat at a place that's authentic and maybe on the corner of some place where a player lives. And what I found, and I expressed this in the interview when I very first became the head coach here, is there was some concern, I think, of how will it be coming from Utah, and will you be able to recruit in the East? And my response was basically, I think people are people, and they're authentic and genuine, and the same principles in establishing a relationship are anywhere, and that's what I found. And there is a tremendous amount of momentum and optimism from the high school coaches that already preceded me going into the schools or the homes. They've already done their research looking at the program at BYU. Many had read the book that was written about our program at BYU, and they knew more than I could tell them before I showed up. And they were already anxious to form a connection. I didn't have to do much convincing. It was more just initiating now a new place to start from. And that was the experience in almost every particular high school or home I went into. There was research already done and optimism that this is going to work, and now wanting to facilitate and partner with who is going to make that happen.
Hi,
Hi.
Coach Ava Wallace from the Washington Post. I think you mentioned this in your introduction, but you said that the guys kind of reminded you of your recruits that you had at BYU. What were the specific things that I guess kind of brought to mind your old players or anything like that?
A couple of things. So the academic standards for athletes are very similar amongst the two institutions. And while I won't share specific numbers, they are very similar in terms of what it will require academically to not only be admitted to UVA and BYU, but to graduate. And so really what I framed to our coaches as they ask me, just like I asked our administration, my first question is, what does it take to get in? About the second day, I realized I wasn't asking the right question. The right question is, what does it take to graduate? That started to identify the characteristics, which will be my answer to your question. Hard work emerged immediately from talking to the dean of students, and I've asked 15 separate people about what it will take to graduate from UVA, and not one had mentioned a GPA or a test score. Hard work has come up the majority of times. Time management came really quickly thereafter. And so those characteristics were actually very similar identifiers and predictors of the kids that I had coached, which means there is a well-rounded approach to these kids where certainly they love football and they're selfless in that regard, but they also are passionate about their education. But they're also they're looking for a good place to be, and Charlottesville is an amazing place to be. That might be the takeaway more than anything that my family and I have identified to this point, not knowing much about Charlottesville, is what an amazing place. And so I don't know if I go back to Utah and how long I stay, but it is an amazing place. And my wife and kids, we love it. And we didn't know we didn't know we would like it that much. And so now the same characteristics and character and values of the kids that I've had play for me the past 13 years collectively is really what I'm seeing here with similar academic standards. But what's unique is the number of choices. Once you add the faith-based component, that restricts the number of choices, 5 to 1. I mean, we're amazed as a coaching staff of how many more choices there are once you take out the faith-based component. That became our normal, and I used it as a strength, as it was for that particular institution. But without that component, it's just, if you look now at character and ability and academics, all of that, those are still very high standards, but we're like kids in a candy store of just how many more choices we have with kids that are very similar. Oh, thanks.
Hi, Bronco. Ed Miller from the Virginian Pilot in Norfolk. Similar to what Andrew asked, but more specific to Virginia, how would you characterize the way you were received in the state, and what do you see as the landscape here, and how competitive is it?
It's really competitive. So I'm very visual again, as I think, and so we put up schools' logos or mascots geographically in our footprint, and we don't have enough room in Virginia for all the mascots that are in our state right now. And we can and will do everything possible to do the best job, and we're already behind for 17, so we'll have to catch up for that. But I think not only do you have to do a great job in your own building every day, and certainly on your own practice field, but then in the stadium on game day, but certainly in your own state, in not only the in-state game that you play, but also in-state recruiting. And so then it branches from there. And so there's certainly more work that we can do. And it doesn't mean I'm going to be specific to a certain region of the state. And I've had that question a lot. What about the 757? Or what about Northern Virginia? Or what about this? I'm viewing Virginia as Virginia. And wherever the best players are that are the right people with the right standards to fit our program, that's where we're going to go. And that footprint will expand to regional, and it will expand to national to find those players. But it will expand as needed. If we don't have to go national more frequently than we need to, then we won't. And so our focus will start inward and expand from there. But what we've already seen is we think there are plenty of players as we become more efficient, effective, in sharing our message, targeting and evaluating. The high school coaches here, I think, are very excited. I have not seen all of them, and I have not been to every part of the state yet. And so we'll do an amazing job with our coaching clinic. It's one of the best things that we do. We'll do an amazing job about bringing former players back. That's also one of the best things that we do. So there's a lot that still has to happen. I haven't run into any resistance yet of, oh, new guy. Wait, Utah? No, don't come in. It's been just the opposite of optimism, excitement, and belief it's going to work, just based on past experience. So that would be the summary of what I've seen so far. And again, I have not been to all parts of the state. There just hasn't been time.
Doug Dowdy from the Roanoke Times. Over the years, Virginia's probably redshirted more than half of its freshman class. The other teams in the league in the area do it. You, of course, have had players go off on missions. Talk about redshirting. Yeah. I assume you have not done much redshirting?
Actually, we've done quite a bit. So 80% of the players at BYU were missionaries my last 3 years. Up to 40% of the team transitioned each year. So that means it changed because of missions and graduation. So to have a consistent team and a consistent winner with all of that turnover is quite amazing. But we designed the program there specific to leveraging young people of faith and missions to make it a strength. Here, it is, I've already identified, I don't plan to redshirt. We're going to play freshmen as they come in. By the way, we played the most freshmen in all of college football last year at BYU. You're welcome to research that. I like players that come in right from the beginning expecting to play, competing to play, and having the mindset to contribute. And just because a player does not play in his first year does not mean he automatically redshirts. The way that I choose to do it is at the end of their fourth year. If they haven't played in a given game, or a given year, they might get the benefit, and maybe the highest honor I can give them is they've earned a fifth year. So that's actually on the tail end rather than the front end. And I think that's how the real world works. Since when do you come in and get a warm-up year? I'm recruiting young people to come in, hit the ground running full speed academically, hit the ground running full speed in the community. That means giving back. Hit the ground full speed competing and helping our program win. And if they don't happen to be on the field the first year, that doesn't mean automatically that was a red shirt. But it also could earn them a fifth year if their sophomore, junior, and senior year, their second year, third year, fourth year, do a phenomenal job. And that's fun for me to say, you know what, I'm so impressed with what you've done. And you weren't entitled to it, but you've earned this, and congratulations. Because the University of Virginia expects the young people to graduate in 8 semesters. And so it works better that way, in my opinion. And so maybe a philosophical shift, but I think it's the right thing for this particular institution.
Bronco, a lot of coaches have different theories about recruiting, and some guys, it's like the draft, take the best players available, and some guys recruit to positions and want to get 5 linemen every year and that kind of. How do you kind of approach that, and is that valid right now when you walk into a program where most of the guys are not your guys?
So our philosophies were very specific and very intentional regarding numbers, meaning that, and what I call workforce planning is simply the succession planning at a position. If that's not managed well, the consistency of your program can suffer instantly and immediately, especially at key positions. So if you haven't managed quarterback very well, you're at huge risk of having a successful and competitive program. If you haven't managed center very well, basically anyone that touches the football, because knowing points drives wins, and it's hard to score points if you don't have someone with the ball that can take it across the white line that means 6 points. And so we're very intentional about what numbers and what scholarships are allocated for each position. We're also very intentional about the specifications of what those players look like. And that's really something we don't share other than it is numbers driven. The numbers right now for our program, not the previous program, in relation to offensive line and defensive line, that's where the biggest discrepancy lies, and where we will be working overtime to get that those numbers up to speed. And it will probably take 2 years. That does not mean we can't have success in the short term. It just there's not as much depth. But we know exactly how many numbers we need. And sometimes that is a trade-off. There could be a fantastic player that might fit in our program. We don't have a scholarship or a need that year, and sometimes we will lose a player like that. But I believe in roster balance, and I believe in consistency. And sometimes you say no, and I don't believe in that there is a one-time chance to get something right. There's always the next thing that can come along. And so while it might be portrayed in every time, how could they let that guy go? Yeah, he might go and play really well for somebody else, but our needs at that time probably meant something else, and we expressed that to him. You're an amazing player, and it just didn't match for us this year. And we wish you the very best of luck, but I actually need an offensive guard. And that allows us, in most cases, to win consistently year after year, but more importantly, practice consistently. Because we can't practice the way I want to unless we have enough bodies to work really, really hard against each other. And if that part is compromised, it's very difficult to play well on Saturday. And I love practice. I don't kind of like it. I love practice because it influences the outcome of the games.
Bronco, Jerry Ratcliffe,
Hey,
Daily
Jerry.
Progress. Even though your intentions are to recruit chiefly in the state and then expand, with all your ties out west and in Hawaii and even Samoa, will you continue to try to gold mine those areas?
We will, but more in a secondary / referral area, meaning that our network of established coaches in the state of Utah, our network of established coaches and connections in Hawaii, basically all over the West, has been so well established that doesn't necessarily require travel on the front end. The referrals come in, and we're very skilled through phone to make that. And if a player has amazing grades, is a phenomenal player, really wants to and would thrive in our environment of work and efficiency and production, then those coaches know, and so those referrals are coming, and if that fits, then we go. So we're not going to go to find them. We're going to get, from a national perspective, the referrals will be coming in while we're mining our existing footprint, but we'll really go anywhere to get a UVA player. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Andrew Ranspeyer again for the Daily Progress. You mentioned the quarterback, and if you don't manage that position well, it could hurt your program. How did you evaluate the quarterback position when you got here, and what went into going out, reaching out to Devontae Cross?
Yeah, really, as we looked at it, I love Matt Johns. He's what an amazing kid, first of all. So to give you an idea, our staff reported January 3rd, if I remember right, and there were a number of players without being asked that were already there because they wanted to meet with us and start talking football and introduce themselves, and Matt was one of those. And already in the workouts, I've seen. I'm really impressed with him, and I've watched his film as well. And so I like Matt. Now, considering that our ideal system, if you were to watch BYU's offense when Taysom Hill was the quarterback, that is our ideal system. And if you're saying, what do we want at that quarterback spot, what do we want him to look like? By the way, Taysom was the fastest player on our team, probably the strongest player on the team, arguably the smartest player on the team, and maybe the most well-rounded. That's who we want at quarterback. Those are high standards, but that's who we want. Now knowing that when Taysom got hurt at BYU, Tanner Mangum had a very similar skill set to what we have now. The offense changed, the points still remained similar, and we won a lot of games, and he was a true freshman. So the ideal is we'd prefer to have dual threat isn't the right word. because dual threat a lot of times, when you think about that, you think about long, rangy, lean athlete. When you think about Taysom Hill, he'll hurt you if you try to tackle him also. More Tim Tebow-ish. Those guys are more of what I'd prefer. So we looked at the existing players at that position, realized that the UVA wasn't really stocked with that type of player. We would prefer to have a running threat if possible. We looked at Sonny Abrams, the existing commit. I can't talk specifically, right? Okay. Oh yeah, jeez. So I'm thinking I'm a day ahead. Anyway, and so he was more of Christian Stewart, maybe Tanner Mangum-ish type quarterback, and so that's kind of we have a market there that's or a niche that's already handled. But what we didn't have handled was the running option in terms of a dynamic guy that if you tried to tackle him, you actually couldn't catch him and he'd run away from you. And so, especially when you're establishing and developing offensive football, it takes more execution and more work for a single threat quarterback than a true dual threat quarterback. And that puts more pressure on your system. We actually prefer having a true dual threat quarterback. But if it was a superhero, our quarterback looks like Thor, really. It's that kind of guy. So if you're saying, what do we want? We want a Thorderback, basically. That's the kind of guy we want. And so you look at the program and you say, is that guy there? And if he's not, then we want to try to find that guy. And if it takes two guys to be one, then it'll take two guys to be one. So that's the best analogy I can give you.
There's a hashtag, it's just boring.
Yeah, that really wasn't, I probably shouldn't have said that.
Bronco, you mentioned that this is a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
It's clear that your assistants and your staff members like each other, get along. During your coaching career, have you been part of staffs that do not get along as well, and how much of an advantage is it with that cohesiveness?
The answer is yes, I've been part of staffs that don't get along, and it's no fun. And it doesn't mean you can't win doing it that way. And it doesn't mean everyone has to like the head coach for you to win. And it could mean that everyone's afraid of the head coach and you can still win. And it could mean that you're not anxious to go to work every day and you could still win. I just don't want to do that. I spend too much time at the office, and I care too much about my own peace of mind, but I also care too much about my coaches and our players. And I'm not afraid of confrontation, nor will I back down from it, but why have it if you don't need it? And it's just a crappy way to live, a poor way to live, excuse me. And so I'd much rather work with people that really want to come to work, believe in what we're doing, like each other, and that's what I've designed. And it's not perfect, but that was intentional.
Assuming you can't talk about Taysom Hill's future,
I cannot.
could you, what is your feeling about the role of the tight end in your system? There were two committed tight ends. One went elsewhere, and it didn't look like you threw a lot to the tight end last year.
So I'll give you just the history at BYU. There was tremendous tight ends for a long, long time. And then we ran into a stretch of I would say, a position that we didn't necessarily evaluate nor recruit especially well. And then some missionaries coming back, that sometimes when a missionary comes back, what you think is an offensive lineman when he leaves comes back looking like a receiver. And sometimes a receiver comes back looking like an offensive lineman, and somewhere in between. And we ended up with a position somewhere in between those two that was tight end. And so it wasn't a position that we did a fantastic job of managing there. We would prefer to have a great tight end. And Christian Baumgartner, I like a lot, just watching him as a mid-year transfer. So we'll use the tight end as effective as a player that we have at that position and that we've managed. So really, I would love to have a great tight end. We didn't do a great job in my time at BYU through managing our personnel at that one spot. And that really led to maybe some of the lack of productivity and emphasis rather than anything else.
Michael Phillips, Richmond Times-Dispatch. Wanted to ask you about the current team you've got both now. Are there any instructions you've given to the strength coaches about things you want them working on this time of year?
Yeah.
And then also when spring football rolls around, what kinds of things we'll see that characterize your style of spring practices and games?
Yeah. This is a great topic. How much time do we have? So we're, I believe, in earned, not given. And the players will make it into the weight room when they earn getting into the weight room. They'll wear a V when they earn a V with the cross sabers. They'll get spring practice when they earn spring practice. You might come out and just see us warm up and try to learn how to warm up for spring practice through 13 days. Everything works sequential. When they master the warm-up, they'll get period 1. If period 1 is mastered, they'll get period 2. So you might see football practice this spring, and you might not see football practice this spring. And that's on the verge of exaggeration, but not quite. It just means that every single thing is earned. So going back to what's happening with Coach Wintrick, work capacity, expectations, and work capacity and expectations, and then work capacity and expectations, and doing things exactly right every single time. Or they do it again.
What Coach is referring to is right now, as the team works out, they've got black shorts, black T-shirts.
Coach,
Black has no significance, by the way. It just was what Nike had available without a logo. So don't read more into that than what there is.
Coach Hank with AP again. I was the one who asked you on the day of your introductory press conference about what do you do on the days when you don't find those 90 minutes.
Got to have them.
What's been your favorite way to spend those 90 minutes since you've been here?
Exercising as hard as I possibly can, because what that does with all the time demands, what I found is that the harder I go, the more solitude that it buys mentally, and it reframes me for the rest of the day. And so it might be in some of the hotels based on when I get there. If you go into a hotel in one of those gyms, you know, it has mirrors, but it's still only about like a closet, but they have mirrors to make it look bigger than that. So I might be doing burpees in my hotel room. And whoever's underneath me probably hears me hitting the floor and getting up. But any type right now of just fierce exercise has been helpful and allowed me to maintain balance. And that's what I like. Eventually, so my Harley's already here, but it's in storage because, well, and it snows. But that's here. I have my bike here. My paddleboard is here. Fly fishing gear is here. It's all in storage currently. So until I can get to it, exercise, running. And I like the stairs that revolve. If you've ever seen that thing, that's a test of will. So you ought to come to our, I invite you, in fact. We could work out at the same time. So it's like a treadmill, except there's stairs that.
You know CPR.
Yeah. Anyway, you can get a lot done in a little bit of time, but it puts you in a place mentally where you really don't want to be, but it's a good place. I like that.
Coach, you're obviously Brad Franklin again with Cavs Corner on Rivals. You're obviously moving.
You're going to
to
have to
3-4.
introduce yourself, by the way, like 20 more times
It's okay.
before I really
Don't
get
worry.
it.
Just
So
think beard. It's
yeah.
all good. So you're going to be moving to a 3-4, obviously. What kind of changes does that mean for the personnel? Do you have to? What guys have you looked at moving? What do you need more of in terms of making that transition?
Really, just the open side end. There'll be a few of those players that will become our will linebacker. Most everything else is really very similar. And so as much as everyone, that's an exaggeration, as much as the concern might be 4-3, 3-4, it really is an open side end, possibly becoming a stand-up will linebacker. That's the biggest transition. And I'm actually pretty confident from what I've seen of our existing personnel and the number of workouts that I've witnessed with what the body types are in terms of capability of being fairly successful to start.
Bronco, you have 4 players enrolled in class,
Yeah.
4 freshmen in January. At BYU, was that something you did commonly with your new guys, and is that something you'll try to use here extensively?
I'm not a huge advocate from the standpoint of, I think high school is an amazing time of life, and in general, the recruiting process continues to go earlier and earlier and earlier, and as an advocate on the board of directors for the AFC, I keep trying to make it stay later and later and later, and I think we make more and more mistakes as we go earlier, and I think we entitle younger and younger players earlier and earlier and earlier, and I think it sets a really poor precedent, and I think it facilitates commitment, decommitment, commitment, decommitment, and I think the word commitment really loses its value and integrity on both sides. And so I think the structure is broken in regards to that. The mid-year enrollees are a product of that, and I don't think there's a significant advantage. Some families want it, and it doesn't mean I hold a grudge or think illy of any person that chooses to do that. But what I'm going to be promoting is players don't come mid-year. They enjoy every minute of high school that they can and become well-rounded in every possible area that they can. And in fact, a lot of times at BYU, After a lot of programs have bridge or transition programs, after trying that, I developed the last year, we just brought our freshmen the first day of training camp, because the advantage that you were supposed to be given by players coming early and taking 6 credits and lifting with your team at a time where the coaches can't have involvement with them. The idea, if you think about that, your strength coach and academic people can be involved with them, but the coaches can't. So let's bring as many young people as possible with extra time in a new place and think that's a good idea. And I don't think it's a good idea. So all that means is the later a player can come, the more the institution will be ready for them to manage them and build habits and expectations from the minute the parents drop them off, and that will aid the transition more smoothly than any other time, and I think that's when fall camp begins.
We'll take a couple more questions here and then need to wrap it up so they can flip the room over for tonight.
Yeah, go Who's.
I just wanted to ask you about Ruffin McNeil and just what he brings to the table and what you like about him.
Man, energy and humor. Those two things to start. Already just the experience goes without saying, and the quality of coach goes without saying. But the story that I use with Coach McNeil is he reached out to our defensive staff and myself 5 or 6 years ago. I don't remember exactly, and sent their defense. Asked some of our coaches to go there and teach East Carolina our defense. Then they came to visit, or vice versa. I don't remember which, but it was really remarkable as we sent coaches there. Coach McNeil, one of our coaches came back and said, "Coach, I think he paid me with a personal check." And that caught my attention for a second. So here are coaches traveling across the country and a coach paying for that out of his own pocket to help his program. And I never forgot that. And I don't know if anyone else would do that. And he did. And so my coaches instantly Coach, we love that guy. Then this year we play East Carolina, and I see him at the 50-yard line, and I walk up to him, and you don't just give Coach Ruff a handshake. You're in a hug, and he's telling you he loves you, and he sweats easy, and you're getting sweated on, and his glasses are fogging up, but it's okay. There's this sense that everything's good. You're with a friend. And then we had a player get hurt on his sideline, and before I could make it over there, he's out there taking care of our guy and telling him he's going to be taken he's going to be well cared for, it's going to be okay, and he's patting him and holding him until I get there. And it's just someone of experience, substance, and quality. But if you have time to be with him, I've never laughed and smiled as much in my entire life. He's just so much fun to be around. And I think he's invigorated for right now of not being a head coach and being able to just coach a small room and have someone else doing all the other things. And I think he feels liberated. And maybe that's why we're having so much fun. So I just, to be the assistant head coach, our players would be in great hands. If something happened to me, I would be smiling, and they would be too, I think.
We'll take a question from Doug and Andrew, and then wrap it up.
Doug Dowdy from Roanoke again. Heard from a coach down our way that a player who had committed here is going to Fork Union. Could you, without confirming the name, is that your understanding? And also, what do you know about all the prep schools in this area? And
yeah. That's a great question. So I didn't know much about the prep schools, but this recruiting experience has taught me that. And man, I'm really impressed. The number of calls I got from our coaches saying, "Coach, I've never been in a high school like this before." This is from my staff, and said, "Coach, this looks just like UVA on a smaller scale and similar standards." And so the private and prep schools in general have been really impressive to my staff. And Marcus Hagens, when Fork Union was mentioned, I didn't know much about it, and Marcus Hagens went to Fork Union, and so he went through with our staff and told us what a day looked like there. And then he said, would he choose to be there? Probably not. Did it change his life in a positive way? Yes. And so what a great resource for a player that we think in all areas maybe other than academic marks is ready to come in, capable but just hasn't maybe demonstrated or was 1 year off. What a great resource that could be. And we intend to use it as a supplemental way for some players to come to our program with who we think are the right players that just need a hair more development. And Coach Hagens, if that is the model, I want as many guys like Coach Hagens as possible.
Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew, this is back again, Daily Progress. it seems from the outside you probably have a better view of this because you reviewed the tape, but the running back position, something from last year, is pretty solid with veteran
Yes.
players. What did you like about the guys coming in? Obviously, Trey Harbison came with a lot of accolades, and then you have a guy that was with you, I guess, a little bit on BYU, and you got him to come to from Hawaii. Wayne, I'm not going to try to say his last name. You probably know better than I do, but what do you like about those two guys?
I do know it better, but I won't say it until you learn to say it. That'll be more fun. Or you could try. Yeah, I like our running back position a lot. And after my first team meeting, we then met. This wasn't before I came to be announced as the head coach. This is after when the team showed up for school. So I met with the team, and then we broke up offense and defense, and we had a minute or two there, and then each position group went with their coaches, and then I had a chance just to go peek in on each room and just get a first impression. There was a great book called Blink, where a first impression, there's a value added by what you think there, and as I looked in the running back room, I just smiled. This looks like a good room, but it also, I'm fairly intuitive, it felt like a good room in terms of who was in there and how that had been staffed and planned. And so I was impressed there. And I think that's probably one of the strengths of the existing team, if I were to say today.
I think Coach referred to spring practice. The first day is scheduled for March 28th.
I think we changed it. Let me verify. That's why I brought my notes.
Now, is that to watch you guys warm up, or is that
There's a great chance it'll be warming up for about an hour and a half, just based on previous experience.
will that be their first experience with warming up the way you want them?
They're practicing every day right now, warming up. And so today they did not make it into the weight room because the warm-up is hard. And then there's things they have to do to get out of the warm-up, to get to lift weights and to pull sleds. But I like things not kind of right. I like them exactly right. And so they're getting training for that. We moved spring practice back, maybe from when it traditionally has been, to give Coach Wintrick more time to help develop the culture and the mindset, to give them their best chance to practice football. And so March 22nd, it's a Tuesday. So we'll practice Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. It's a great model, and I'll speak more about spring practice later. And possibly, if we play a spring game, will be April 23rd. And that is if. That'll be earned also. So I don't choose that, by the way. The players choose that based on how they approach every single day. I love the power of choice. I just hold them accountable for their choices.